It was a freezing November morning, a morning that cut right through you, when John Smith found himself sitting on the same park bench, the very same bench he had called home for the past 3 years. The air bit through his worn army surplus coat, the fabric frayed at the cuffs, missing 2 buttons. His fingers, numb from the cold, clutched a small brown paper bag containing the only food he had found in 2 days, half a ham sandwich. Someone had tossed it near the back of the local Safeway. The bread was stale, the edges hard, but John didn't care. After 22 years serving his country, after 3 tours in Iraq, after losing his wife to cancer and his home to medical bills, John had learned that beggars couldn't be choosers. He was 68 years old, and he was invisible. The park was empty that morning, too cold for the joggers and dog walkers who usually filled these paths. John pulled his army cap lower over his thinning grey hair and began to unwrap his sandwich, savouring the ritual of a meal, even if the meal itself was barely worth savouring. His hands shook, partly from the cold, partly from age. The world had moved on without him. His children had scattered to different states, embarrassed by their father's fall from grace. His friends from the service were mostly dead or lost to the fog of time. John Smith, decorated sergeant. 2 Purple Hearts had become a ghost haunting a park bench. Before we continue, if you believe in honoring those who served, in kindness to strangers, and in the power of small gestures to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Because stories like this remind us that heroes walk among us every day, often unrecognized, often forgotten. That was when he heard the motorcycle, a deep, rumbling thunder that seemed to shake the frozen air itself. John looked up and saw a massive Harley-Davidson pulling into the parking lot at the edge of the park. The rider was enormous, well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders like a linebacker, even from 50 yards away. John could see the black leather vest, the patches, the beard that hung nearly to his chest. A Hell's Angel. John had seen them before on the highways during his drifting years, always in groups, always intimidating. But this one was alone, and something was wrong. The biker dismounted slowly, too slowly. Like each movement cost him enormous effort. He staggered slightly, caught himself on the handlebars, then began walking toward the park benches, toward John. The veteran tensed, ready to gather his meager belongings and move on. He had learned long ago that trouble rarely announced itself, but when it did, the wise man listened. The biker collapsed onto the bench next to John, with a heavy grunt. Up close, John could see the man's face was pale, almost grey. His eyes were unfocused. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. The patches on his vest read Hell's Angels Oakland. And below that, a name tag, Bear. Bear sat there for a long moment, his breath coming in ragged gasps. John watched him silently, waiting. Finally, the biker spoke, his voice a rough whisper. Been riding 3 days. Ran out of money in Nevada. Haven't eaten in 48 hours. Just need to rest for a minute. John looked at the massive man beside him. This intimidating figure, who had probably never asked anyone for anything in his life, now reduced to explaining himself to a homeless veteran on a park bench. And in that moment, John didn't see a Hell's Angel. He saw a fellow soldier, a different kind of soldier, but a soldier nonetheless. Someone who understood brotherhood, someone who understood sacrifice without a word. John unwrapped his precious half sandwich and tore it in 2. He held out the larger piece to the biker. Bear stared at the offering like it was made of gold. His eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, traveled from the sandwich to John's worn army surplus coat, to the medal still pinned to the chest despite years of sleeping rough, The silver star, 2 purple hearts, the patches that told stories of service and sacrifice. "You're giving me your food," Bear said slowly, not quite a question. "You don't have anything else." John shrugged. "A man's got to eat, and I've been hungrier than this." Bear took the sandwich. For a long moment, he just held it, staring at it like he was trying to understand something his mind couldn't quite grasp. Then he ate, slowly, savoring each bite the way only the truly hungry can. John ate his smaller portion, and the 2 men sat in companionable silence as the cold morning sun crept higher over the park. When the food was gone, Bear turned to John. "What's your name?" "Soldier." "John Smith, Sergeant, 1st Infantry Division, retired." Bear nodded slowly, his eyes taking in everything: the worn clothes, the plastic bags containing John's worldly possessions, the dignity that somehow remained despite everything. "I'm Marcus Stone, President, Hells Angels, Oakland. And I won't forget this, Sergeant Smith. I won't forget." John just nodded. He had heard promises before, from politicians who sent young men to die, from VA officials who lost his paperwork, from a society that thanked veterans for their service while stepping over them on the street. Promises were just words, and words cost nothing. Marcus Stone climbed back onto his Harley, the color returning to his face now that he had food in his stomach. He looked back at John one more time, his expression unreadable, then roared off into the morning mist. John watched him go, then settled back on his bench to wait for whatever came next. What came next arrived exactly 1 week later. John was in his usual spot when he heard it. Not 1 motorcycle, not 5, not 50. A sound like rolling thunder that seemed to come from every direction at once. The ground beneath the park bench vibrated. Dogs in nearby houses began to bark. Car alarms triggered up and down the street. John stood up slowly, his old bones protesting, and turned toward the parking lot. What he saw stopped his heart. Motorcycles. Hundreds of them. Harley-Davidsons stretching as far as he could see, filling the parking lot, spilling onto the street, engines idling in a symphony of rumbling thunder, leather vests everywhere, men and women, young and old, all wearing the same red and white Hells Angels patch. The chrome gleamed in the winter sunlight. The exhaust smoke rose like fog. And at the front of this army, dismounting from his massive Harley, was Marcus Stone. Bear walked across the frozen grass toward John, and this time he wasn't alone. 250 bikers followed him, forming a massive semicircle around the park bench where John had lived for 3 years. The thunder of engines died down to an idling purr as every eye focused on the elderly veteran standing alone in the center. John's legs felt like they were about to buckle. He couldn't believe it. This couldn't actually be happening. This couldn't be for him. Marcus stopped just a couple of feet away, his expression serious, but his eyes held a warmth that reached John's soul. "Sergeant John Smith," he announced. His voice carried clearly across the hushed crowd. "1 week ago, you shared your only food with a stranger. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You saw a hungry man, and you fed him with the only thing you had." The crowd of bikers murmured their approval. John felt tears stinging his eyes, but he fought them back with sheer willpower. He was a soldier. Soldiers didn't just break down and cry. Marcus continued, "I went back to Oakland and told my brothers what happened. A homeless veteran, a decorated war hero, sleeping on a park bench, and he gave away half his only meal to a complete stranger. Do you know what they said?" John shook his head, unable to force any words past the lump in his throat. They said, "We ride." Every chapter from here to Seattle, every brother and sister who could make it, 250 men and women who believe that kindness like yours deserves to be honored. Marcus reached inside his vest and pulled out a thick, heavy envelope. Inside that envelope is $23,000. Every chapter chipped in. It's yours. First month's rent, last month's, a deposit on an apartment. Whatever you need. John's hands trembled as he accepted the envelope. He couldn't bring himself to open it. He couldn't even look at it. The tears, held back for so many decades, finally broke free, streaming down his weathered cheeks. But Marcus wasn't done yet. He turned and nodded to a biker behind him, a younger man with kind eyes and a gentle face. This is David Chen. He runs a veterans employment program in Sacramento. He's got a job waiting for you, if you want it. Nothing fancy, but steady work. And they understand that some of us have been through things. David stepped forward and shook John's hand firmly. We take care of our own, Sergeant. Welcome home. Another biker approached, this one carrying a brand new leather jacket with an American flag patch on one shoulder. We know you're not a Hell's Angel, she said, her voice strong and clear. But this is from all of us. Property of Hell's Angels, friend of the family. John took the jacket. His hands shaking uncontrollably. He couldn't speak. He could barely breathe. 70 years of life, 3 tours in Iraq, a dead wife, lost contact with his children, years spent on the street, and no one had ever done anything like this for him. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. The weight of it felt like an anchor, grounding him to reality. One more thing, Sergeant. We checked on your kids, your daughter, Emily. She's in Portland. She didn't know you were homeless. She didn't know you were struggling. We made sure she knows now. She's driving down today. John broke. He sobbed, openly and without shame, surrounded by 250 bikers who stood in respectful silence, as a decorated war hero finally let go of decades of pain. Some of the bikers wiped tears from their own eyes. Others looked away, giving him privacy in his moment of release. When John finally managed to compose himself, he looked at Marcus with something akin to wonder. Why? Why would you do all this? I just gave you half a ham sandwich. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile John had seen on his face. Because that half sandwich told me everything I needed to know about who you are. You had nothing, and you gave anyway. That's not charity. That's character. And character like that deserves to be rewarded. The bikers began to clap, then cheer, then roar their approval. The sound echoing off the surrounding buildings. John stood in the center of it all, wearing his new jacket over his old army surplus coat, clutching the envelope that represented a new life, waiting for a daughter he thought had forgotten him. And before we end, we have one special request for you. Comment below with the words, "Heroes deserve honor," to show that you stand with Sergeant Smith. To show that you believe kindness, real kindness, the kind that costs something, should always be rewarded. Because the Hells Angels didn't just help one homeless veteran that day. They sent a message that echoes across every highway, in every city, wherever their engines roar. We see you. We see the ones the world forgets. We see the kindness that goes unnoticed. And we never, ever let it go unrewarded. 3 months later, John Smith stood in the doorway of his small apartment in Sacramento, watching his daughter Emily help his grandson with his homework at the kitchen table. He had a job, steady work at the Veterans Center, where he now helped others, just like him, find their way back. On his wall hung a photo from that day in the park, 250 motorcycles arranged in a perfect semicircle, and one old soldier standing in the center. Finally seen, finally home. The leather jacket hung by the door, the patches gleaming in the lamplight, friend of the family, and John knew, as he knew few things in his long life, that some families aren't born. They're forged in moments of kindness, in choices made when no one is watching, in half a ham sandwich shared with a stranger on a cold November morning. Like, share and subscribe if you believe that kindness always finds its way back, because somewhere out there, 250 motorcycles are still riding, still watching, still ready to answer when kindness calls.